Right.
Almost June. We still have today and then tomorrow left in May. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into the Maize and Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football. We're here on Rivals.com, and we've got a former Wolverine with us, and there he is on the screen, smiling, looking good. That's Jerry Diorio. Jerry, nice to see you. How are you?
Great to be a Michigan Wolverine, Denny, always.
Yeah, well, it's always great to have you on here. We've got plenty to talk about, including some recruiting, and this month spills into June, and Michigan has a lot of schools, a lot of players coming in to visit to make the future of Michigan football and see who ends up committing and all those kind of things. We'll have some of those players, and we'll tell you who they are and how they'll do. Now, I asked Jerry to come up with his 5 favorite players from the 70s, and he came in with 5 strong players. We'll talk about those. And then look, we'll go 80s, 90s, 2000, 210. And this kid goes over 5-6 weeks to go through that, but it's always fun to look back to see. You might play along at home, come up with your own 5 to see how that would go. But Jerry, let's start with some of the news, the ins and outs of what's happening with Michigan football. A lot of people, last year it was back, and it's back again this year, and that is EA Sports. Then they have come out with their college football 26 game this week, and it's their deluxe edition. It's a cover with tons of schools of there, but if you look at the front row, you see, I think there's a Penn State player on there. Right here in the second row is Bryce Underwood, and there's Shoelace with his varsity coat on. I think Shoelace put in there because he was one of the all-time favorite EA Sports cover players, and he ends up on there. So Michigan gets 2 players on EA Sports. That's always nice.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. 2 great ones.
Yeah. We'll see how you do when it comes down to that. And then camps, Michigan put out their camp list. They got a prospect camp coming up this Monday, and then this Wednesday, and then the following Monday, another prospect camp, and then the following Wednesday, a one-day prospect camp. You got a quarterback academy, you got a big man camp coming up in mid-June, and then skill camp on a one-day. And this is different over the last few years. This is kind of the way it's gone. I think it's more of a streamline where they just have one days where, 10 years and certainly 20 years ago, camps would last all week. Right, Jerry?
Well, it's so different, Denny, that nowadays compared to when I was in school and even a couple decades after that. Michigan used to be the standard of camps. It was the original. I believe Bo had up to over 2,000 campers at Michigan. Many of my teammates went through the camp. I don't know why I didn't go through the camp at that time when I was in high school. I went to the Joe Namath football camp, and it was actually a full contact camp. So I went there, but I didn't get the chance to go to Michigan. But many of my teammates went to that camp, and that's where they got discovered. And so Michigan was the standard bearer of camps. And then I think it really changed with Harbaugh. I really do believe it changed with Harbaugh. I think really Jim went after the way some of the SEC teams were doing their camps, satellite camps, individual camps, one-day camps, bringing in top talent and evaluating them against other top talent. And, I think the last 10 years is what's changed is that camp. It's no longer a camp for teaching the game to all kinds of players of all different skills and all different levels to more of a specialized these are the guys we're looking for, and these are the guys we want to look at in competition.
Yeah, Harbaugh really did hit the ground running. He shook things up right off the bat. Everybody down there, wait a second, what's going on? How can Harbaugh have this satellite camp? And then, but if Saban was like, no, we don't want that. Of course, they didn't want to see that. And what I remember about those satellite camps and that, the SEC got them fired up. Harbaugh was actually, and I don't know how far it ever went, but he was going to have, I don't know, was it in Fiji or something, New Zealand? He was going to have camps. And, you think about all the different players that come from, the different regions in the world. And you thought, wow, now you wondered, how he was going to do all this. Well, this was one of his ideas that he put into play. And this was the start of the NCAA, and also with other teams having to wonder what's going on up north, with Harbaugh, what he was going to be up to. So, yeah, that was Jerry. Did you? So you went.
Denny, I don't think he gets enough credit for his innovations, not only at Michigan but in college football in general. The camps are one. Revenue sharing is another. I think he was a big part in NIL and the transfer portal. So I think Jim Harbaugh was one of the great. I think you can claim him as one of the great innovators in college football in the 21st century. Anyways, he's done a tremendous amount for college football. These camps, if we remember correctly, Denny, and I hate to bring up a bad subject, but Jim's first punter was from Australia.
Oh,
if
yeah.
we remember correctly, and so we got Klein in there from Germany. So Jim was not ever afraid to go out and look at different areas, different people, different places to get players, and I think he's really opened competition up big time in college football.
Yeah, and some of the stuff he did, you thought signing with the Stars, he made it like the Oscars that one year, and I was like, wow, this is just that's just something. When you see people do things like that, it's all out there and anybody could do it. And you're just like, wow, that's pretty cool. How he was able to do that. And then when he would take in the summer, he started, let's take him around the world, let's do all this. That was before. And I used, the critics were like, well, who's coming to Michigan to go see the world? And you're thinking, well, there might be some people like that. And what I thought was that out of all of that, and I don't know if 17-year-olds thinking, yeah, I want to go to Paris or whatever else, or Italy, but I remember seeing two pictures. One of them was on like one of the main streets in Paris at one of these cafes, and I saw Don Brown, and there's a booster that I know from Michigan, that a donor that was sitting there by Don Brown. And then the following year, I said, oh yeah, there's, so-and-so. Then the following year they were down in South Africa. They were like looking over the water and everything. And I saw that same donor, and they're standing over there by Harbaugh. And it was, I'm like, oh, there's Nicole again. And I thought, wow, that's really smart. It's not so much, maybe it wasn't, I don't know if he thought about this, that it was going to be for the players or their family or for the coaches or anything else. But when I saw that donor and they were all smiles, then I thought that's the kind of thing that a donor would like. What a smart move by Harbaugh.
Denny, I played over in Italy for a year, and I got to tell you, it was probably the most learned experience I ever had. Honestly, I mean, I learned more in that year about culture, about how businesses work, and how Europe worked, and it was very learned. I tremendous amount of knowledge I gained through it, and a great experience overall. And so when you're an 18-year-old kid, 17, 18-year-old kid, and you see a coach out there trying to make your life better, he's trying to open you up to new, different things. You've got to believe that guy cares a little bit about you. He's thinking about you, or he's thinking about his team and how he can make that experience great. And that's what Harbaugh was great at. great motivator, great innovator, and great coach.
Yeah. Also, we got some news items, got some times coming up for some of the kickoffs. Also, on June the 6th and 7th, the College of Infractions, we find out, maybe that'll be the final step. We'll see. They will release what their findings are on one of those days, and then we'll find out what Michigan's response is. And so maybe it'll just be, Sherrone Moore is going to be suspended for game 3 and game 4. Here's the some of the recruiting restrictions. Here's the fine. It's going to be a day. We'll move on, or maybe there'll be some other stuff in there than Michigan. However, but we'll find out on one of those days, and we'll find out Michigan's response. That's also something to keep an eye on. That I know.
Now, Denny, let me get this straight. We're getting all this because the NCAA had a stupid rule that they now rejected and gone back the other way and said technology should be in the helmets. Is that what we're being investigated for? I just want to make that clear.
A bylaw that they came across that was antiquated, but was still on the books. And, Michigan, however you want to look at it, worked around it or did not. And that's the reason. One of the reasons.
So we're getting penalized for a stupid penalty that ends out off the books.
Well, I can say that it's sometimes there's, small things that, you get snagged on. And I would say that that's one of these things.
I wouldn't even acknowledge it, to be honest with you. The NCAA is irrelevant. This is the lowest form of investigation you can have, and it's all based on they got their butts kicked because Harbaugh went out there and told everybody the players are getting screwed because of the NCAA. That's what this is all about.
Well, we'll see if Michigan's going to accept all that, or if they send their response. We'll look at that date. Jerry, there's some times that have been put out there for some games. Michigan will start the first 2 games. The opener will be under the lights. The next week at Norman, I figured that was going to be a night game. When you looked at the schedule, you got CMU at noon, Nebraska at 3:30. A lot of people were thinking that could have been a night game. And then OSU and Michigan and OSU at noon. That's the traditional start there. Wisconsin, it's either going to be, that will not be a night game. That'll be either noon or 3:30. That's how it played out. And if, the one part about it being a game that's a night game early on is that it'll be a little cooler, and it can be kind of hot on last day of August,
especially in October, there, Denny. Especially in October. In October. September in Oklahoma. 7:30 is a good place for us to be playing Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, it's going to be hot in Oklahoma, in Norman. Woo! It's early September, right? And
September 6th.
And I'm happy that we're kicking that off at 7:30.
Jerry, any of those, you go on any of those games right off the bat, you take a look and say, okay, now that I see that, I like it, I'll be there.
Well, I got a possibility of going out to Norman and watching the Wolverines take on the Sooners out there in Norman, and pretty excited about it. Hopefully everything works out and I can get out there.
Yes, that would be very exciting if you would be able to do that. And, there's I looked immediately. I thought, week 1, that Labor Day weekend, Ohio State is playing Texas. I thought, well, that's going to be at 7:30, but we find out that they're going to use that game at noon. And so Michigan, the game sets up. If I could have it perfectly myself, it's fine that Ohio State is playing Texas at noon. I would have wanted Michigan at 3:30, because then at 7:30, it's Clemson is playing, and they're playing a big game there. That would be one that everybody would want to watch. I like all 3 windows having, really entertaining games, but it's going to be okay. I'll be able to tape that Clemson game and then, watch Michigan. So it works out fine. And then, the week 2, it's all Michigan, Oklahoma. That's going to be a great game. And what they played, what they play in the first ever Orange Bowl, Jerry, is that right?
I think that was the first time they ever played was in the Orange Bowl. I believe it was 76 with the Selman brothers, Dewey, Louie, and Lucius, wasn't it?
I didn't know the three names. One of them was of great players, the Selman brothers. And they finally, that was one, I don't know if I know the history exactly, but Michigan, the previous 3 or 4 years, but they lost 2 games by 1 or 2 points, and they weren't going to any bowl games. And that's when college football is like, why don't we take and get some more bowl games here? And it's kind of the Michigan rule.
Denny, some of my players that I mentioned in the 70s lineup, many of them played on in that stretch where they never got to a bowl game. They lost 1 game and tied 1, I believe, and never got to a bowl game. And it's almost it's incomprehensible that a team that good would not be rewarded with a bowl game back then. And it was a good thing that people stood up and said, hey, listen, this is not right. And I think the Orange Bowl against that Oklahoma team was Michigan's first non-Rose Bowl appearance in many years, if not ever.
Good point. And people, that's when, you look back and you have to know the context, and you have to know what the rules were and everything. But for the longest time, look, Bo's bowl record spoke for itself, and how he ended up performing in the Rose Bowl. But a lot of people used that he never got to won a national championship against him. And it wasn't a big deal because most people understood that it was tough to, you had to win all the games and you had to get over Ohio State to ultimately win that national championship. So most people understood that and still put him up, amongst the great coaches in college football. If you used, you'd say today's rules, he would have made the college football playoff like every year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, those were great teams, great personnels on those teams. And for those guys not to go to a bowl game in that period of time was unbelievable.
Yeah. And he had a winning record ultimately against Ohio State, which was pretty good and all that. That's how they all break down. Those are those first 5 games that we have times. Wisconsin's one or the other, and then the Ohio State game. And then we'll see about the rest of these. But you start making your schedule. You start making your plans now when you see some of this. So there you go.
I like the bye between Nebraska and Wisconsin. That's a nice bye right there. That gives us an opportunity to go in, pick off a Nebraska team, relax a little bit, and get back and get on a real good momentum at coming home against Wisconsin. That's a nice bye. And the other bye, November 8th. That's a nice buy as well, because now all of a sudden we got a little bit of a healing time going into that final stretch. And I like those 2 buys. I like where they're at.
Jerry, let me have you answer some quick questions before we go to the recruiting visit weekend. U of M stating that Michigan should alternate the time of the game. Michigan, Ohio State, every 2 years. 2 years at noon. And then the next 2 years at prime time at 7:30. What would you say to that proposal from Ted?
With all due respect, Urabi, I'm a traditionalist on this one. I like to see that noonday kickoff, high noon. It's it. Battle's on. Draw guns are blazing. Let's go. Noon showdown. And I like it. I'd like to keep it there. And the other thing is, man, it's going to be bitter late November in the late PM watching that game. I like the noon kickoff.
Yeah, I wouldn't go crazy if they wanted to do something every once in a while. I'll move it at night. But like you, the weather part, people, it all depends on yourself. If you go to these games, you're like, no, I want it at noon. It could be 10 degrees. It's a lot different. It's crazy. Maybe not crazy, but for people that go to the games, they understand, noon, it's going to be cold and gray and everything else, but maybe the sun comes out. It's a lot different than being at 7:30 at night, 10 degrees.
No chance.
And, it makes you feel a little bit different. So I would vote to keep it at noon, but I wouldn't go crazy about it. But I'm with you. They give me a vote, keep it at noon. It's great. Let's just go right there and keep it there. All right, here's Ted says it's interesting, an opening night game. But we said because of the weather, August the 30th, I think of the kickoff classic against Virginia that one year where it was 90 degrees plus at the stadium. That was terrible.
Danny, we had a reunion that day. It was and Bo was alive. It was a reunion of the Rose Bowl. If I'm not mistaken, it was 91.
95, Virginia
95.
Game. Yeah.
95. Yeah. We had a 15-year reunion. I remember that day. We were sweating in the bleacher. I mean, at kickoff, it was in tremendous heat, and it was tough. It must have been a tough day for those kids. And I remember playing Washington State opening day, kind of a high noon game, 1 o'clock, and I think it was 110 on the turf.
Ooh,
and, when that turf heats up, it gets hot.
Yeah, I don't know if that sounds like it would be the hottest game in Michigan history. I remember the one year John Navarre, so it would have been 2001. They played at UCLA, and that game was like 110 degrees too, something crazy like that. But so you get a little bit cooler. I like Michigan looks great at any time that they play, but the night games, I'm all right with it. Stay up a little bit later. It's okay with me. I wouldn't want to move them to Friday. I don't like that so much. I like it to be on a Saturday, but for years people would complain. Michigan always plays at noon, and then the argument is that it's great. Noon games are great, everything else, but then you get home and everything, and then you turn on the TV and you're watching the SEC and they're playing at Death Valley, and it's it just looks cool, and the players like it. The fans love how it looks. It's just it has a little something special to it, and so you got to remember that part. Now, if you're somebody that hates, you got to drive in. A lot of people come in from the west side of the state. It takes them 4 or 5 hours to get back. That's tough. That could be tough. Going to football games, I mean, you got to be, I don't know, say you got to be tough like a football player, but you do have to, I mean, it takes a little something. Michigan football is an all-day event. You go, I think about if I wasn't doing anything on August the 30th, I'd go down there at noon, man. I'd be playing bocce ball. I would be going crazy down there. I didn't
know that about you. You're a bocce ball guy, huh? Didn't know that.
Yeah, I've been to the Michigan golf course about 5-6 times with my bocce ball set, and you roll it. The bocce ball's great anywhere, but then you get it on those Michigan fairways. You can get 100 yards away and start playing a little bit. Great game, great tailgate game. That's my tailgate game, Jerry, bocce ball.
Beautiful.
It's a great one. Did you play a little bit when you were over there?
At Mooney, Youngstown Cardinal Mooney, very Italian ethnic influence. They used to have a fundraiser. It was a bocce ball tournament every year. And I'm telling you, names like Paterno and Herb Street and Tressel and I think Fowler was there once, and Mangino from Kansas. There were so many big names that used to go to that bocce ball tournament.
Probably. I bet Mariucci, he had one, right? So I bet he was in there.
Who was that?
Mariucci, the Lions coach for a couple of years.
I don't know if he was ever there.
I know he had one. He had a bocce ball deal when he was.
They used to make like 50, 60 grand on that one-day bocce ball tournament. And that ain't no BS. It was a steak dinner. We used to have it they had it at the MBR club down in Youngstown, and big hit.
It's a great game.
Great game.
It really is. All right, we've got more comments coming in. Here's Michigan Go Blue 1, 2, 3, 4. We love it. We love him dropping the bag. He's going to basketball. Jerry, Michigan basketball looks very promising for years to come. He's not sold on Moore and football yet. The wide receiver core might be the worst in the Big Ten, so he's hoping for the best. Anything that jumps out that you want to get into there?
Well, I think there's no doubt that Michigan is the talk of the town right now, so to speak, in basketball. I mean, we've pretty much cleaned up in the transfer portal, the recruiting. Dusty has done an outstanding job making Michigan basketball the place where people want to be. And I'm wondering if he's really utilizing that NIL to the max, which it seems like he is. And if he is, man, that's a big thing. All of a sudden now Michigan is one of your top schools going into the 2025-2026 season. I mean, they're ranked high. They've got the recruits, the transfer portal kids, and looking for big things. As far as football is concerned, I'm not sold on we might have one of the worst receiver core groups in the Big Ten. I like the young man from Indiana. I like him a lot. I think he's going to be fine. I think Klein is going to present tremendous amounts of problems for defenses because he can line up tight and he can line up wide. And the depth at tight end can allow us to move him out wide. And when you look at him, he's one of the fastest, if not the fastest kid on the Michigan team. That's something. He's going to be a nightmare matchup for defenses. Shamaj Morgan, I'm looking for big things from him. We've got a new offensive system. We have a new offensive coordinator. I'm very excited to see what he's going to bring to this team. I've really felt that the imagination of our offense was very, very little last year. We did not have a lot of imagination. And I'm not talking about we need to throw the ball all over the place. I'm saying we didn't have the imagination even in the run game. We hit some really big plays on an inside zone concept, and we didn't have a lot to make defenses respect other areas of the run game. And so I'm really excited about our new offensive philosophy. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And sometimes when you have that kind of innovation and nuances going into your offense, I think there's going to be some real nice upside to our receivers and our quarterback.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would say not so fast on the wide receivers. I think the wide receivers, if Michigan had a competent quarterback last year, a competent passing game, people would be looking at it a lot differently. I'm glad that you pointed out the tight ends. I would add in Hogan Hansen, who I think is going to lead Michigan in targets and receptions this year, knowing that I'm thinking that it's going to be Bryce Underwood as the quarterback, and knowing how young quarterbacks like to utilize their tight ends, whether it's pro or college, we have seen that. So I think the tight ends will be huge. And, you add in that, last year and how you just throw that away. But I'm with you with Samaj Morgan. I know Fred Moore dropped one right in the breadbasket for the spring game. But
he also caught a touchdown pass in the Rose Bowl, right?
Yes, he did.
So
he caught one in the bowl game, the ReliaQuest Bowl.
Yep, my bad. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. No, the bowl game, but you're right. But so from McCulley to Morgan or Moore, and then, I think out of Shannon Goodwin, Amarian Stewart, and then they bring in 3 different wideout as freshmen. And I know 2 of them, Browder didn't have the greatest spring game, the 2 reps. If he ends up catching those 2, I think we're talking a lot more about, whoa, they really got something there. They got a speedster coming in from Louisiana. And then we'll see about Andrew Marsh. He was there at the spring game. I think they've got enough there. So there could be some guys, calling it. I mean, look, but being one of the worst of the Big Ten, that would be, you want to say they're mid, which isn't a very flattering thing, but I think they're better than what he's, talking about there. But that leads us in, Jerry, perfectly to the official visit weekend, because look at here. 2 of the players that they're bringing in this weekend are 4-star wide receivers. One from Texas named Zion Robinson, 4-star wideout, and another 4-star wideout out of, I think it says Georgia, Christian Ward. So a pair of top-end wide receivers. They're bringing in Shadarius Tootle, who everything looked great for Michigan, and then he verbaled to Auburn, but they have him in this weekend. You get a guy in, whether he's committed somewhere else or not. If somebody's committed elsewhere and they're taking visits, you've got a chance. Add him. Then they bring in a safety out of Texas and an interior offensive lineman out of Idaho. Well, they're that Colston Loveland, the Michigan putting building a wall around the Yellowstone, the greater Yellowstone area, Jerry, when it comes down to it. But they're bringing a lot of wide receivers in. I think everybody is pretty obvious when you got Bryce Underwood. They'll be doing better when it comes down to that. You're there with us, Jerry. What do you think?
Well, first of all, Denny, recruiting is completely different. It's who's the last guy in the room sometimes is going to be the person at the school that gets the recruits, because these kids are all over the place. One minute they're committing, the next minute they're going somewhere else, the next minute they're going somewhere else. So recruiting is going to be a 365 day. You're going to have to be on top of your game every day and know what your recruits are doing. And to couple that, to go one more step, Michigan, and I've said this many a times, I believe we've got the deepest pockets. And we're going to be the one dictating those last-minute signees. And if we really want somebody, I think we can open our pocketbooks and go get them, and that will throw everything else off. My big thing is right now, it's nice to bring these guys in. It's nice to see them compete. We'd love to get them in these one-day camps, these skill camps, and see how they compete against other kids their caliber. But at the end of the day, this is a 365 4 or 5 year deal. I mean, you're constantly recruiting these players every day now.
Yeah, and like the 1, 2, 3, 4 was saying about, he wasn't sold on Moore. Now that the recruiting part, where you talked about them having deep pockets, and they have everything else covered, that you're looking for if you're a recruit, Moore did a great job last year in recruiting.
November was a phenomenal month for Michigan football in 2024. So I'm here with Moore. The verdict is still out. I want to see what he does from this point on. He understands he's got an advantage, but he also has to understand that with that advantage comes expectations. So where do we end up with Coach Moore leading the way? He's got a lot to offer his team, his recruits, and we'll see where it goes from here. Expectations are very high for him, though. I will say that.
Well, I was down on Sherrone Moore after the Oregon and Indiana game. I don't know if you could have been any more down on him than I was. In those back-to-back games, the on-field game management was very poor. But what happened between the Indiana game and Northwestern game, and I know he had nothing to do with last year's record of them, beating Northwestern, Ohio State, and then Alabama, but they flipped Bryce Underwood during that off week, and everything has taken off since then. Obviously, the recruiting has taken off since then. And, they beat Northwestern. They got a bowl. They beat Ohio State. The defense was spectacular that day. And then with all of the players, the guys that were all going to go in the first round not being there, and almost everybody that's coming back this year, with the exception of Amir Hall, they took Alabama, who had all their first stringers in there, and they look great. So, that, and you add in that Sherrone Moore did a great job coaching the championship season when he got a win at Penn State. That was a top 10 win for him. And then he got a win against Ohio State. That was a top 10 win for him. That is not completely, just thrown out. I mean, that's something he did. And that was a game day.
And don't forget, Maryland was in between there.
Yeah.
With his brother at quarterback. So, I mean, you're talking about 3 very capable teams of beating you, 2 on the road, and Moore did the job. He deserved to be the head coach, in my opinion, for that right there. But now the expectations are we need to be in the playoffs. We need to be competing for not only Big Ten championships, but national championships year in and year out with the way the field is stacked for us.
Yeah, and Ted's talking about the NIL and saying with the Michigan's alumni network, this has always been the case. People talked about. I see whatever the alumni network is. People say, hey, if everyone that was just even in alums take apart, rabid fans that didn't go to Michigan or anything else, just the alums, if they gave $10, what the prize pot, would be for U of M. It would be gargantuan. And, look, Ellison, Jolyn, she's in that alumni network that cast a pretty big net that came out of nowhere. Jolyn, Ellison, that was pretty good. So there you go.
Michigan right now is sitting in a very good position. We don't want to lose it.
No. And they understand, everybody understands that football is the straw that stirs the drink. And Harbaugh, he didn't have any answers about how to pay for all the other sports and everything else, but he was like, let's make sure everybody's getting taken care of in football. I mean, these guys, and there's a pretty good point to that. These are the guys that, it's a very dangerous sport. It's a great sport, very dangerous sport. These are the guys that are bringing in all the money. Let's make sure we remember that. And they got to fill 110,000 every Saturday.
Yep.
So yeah, you got to prime that pump. You got to get players. You got to be able to do that. All of that. That's good stuff. So there are the guys that are coming in, and then there's been a couple additions. I'm going to keep an eye. These Robinson and Ward, and then Tootle, and then some late additions here that have happening. Here's a Georgia verbal of a wide receiver, another 4-star that's going to come in and take a look. Marchess there you go. That's somebody to keep an eye on. And then also another 4-star as a defensive tackle. And this is a kid from New Jersey. Damari Simeon, also in this weekend. You're keeping track at home. There you go. A couple guys that also will be making the rounds. Let's go. I think that's the way to say it there. And Jerry, for those that like to follow it up to the minute, just like what we're doing here, there are always additions and subtractions when you have this official visit weekend of guys that are coming in. You want to know how it's going right now. Well, that's what the Maize and Blue Review, that's part of, what we're about, being able to track the official visits and what everyone's looking, what they're saying, how things are looking for Michigan. You join the Maize and Blue Review today by going to michigan.rivals.com. We'll see you over there. And there you go. You got Dusty May, and then you've got the rest of the players that, you can look at in football and how it's going to shape up. And we look forward to that. All right, Jerry. So we're in the decade of 2020s, 5 years through. We went all the way back to the 70s and asked you to come up with your 5 favorite players. And I threw some of them in there, and whether we ranked them or not, I started out with number 1. I think anybody that could remember the 70s is going to have Rick Leach on their list, a true freshman quarterback playing for Bo in the 70s. What do you remember about Rick Leach?
That picture right there was one of them. The other thing I remember is Rick Leach faking the option, dropping back with his left hand and hitting Doug, I believe it was Doug Marsh, right down the middle in South Bend, busted the game open. I believe we won 28-14, if I'm not mistaken. in South Bend. I believe that was his senior year. That was his senior year.
Against Joe Montana.
Was it? Yes, that's right. Against Joe Montana. Absolutely. That and the fact that, he just kind of dominated the Big Ten once that freshman season was over. I mean, once he ended that Orange Bowl against Oklahoma, he pretty much dominated. He was the dominating quarterback in the Big Ten for the next 3 years and really dominated Ohio State. So, and won twice in Columbus.
Started as a true freshman, one of the real great athletes. If you were making a list, when you think about it, he was playing football, the stories of him during the spring practice done with football, he'd go over to Ray Fisher and he would play baseball, where he ultimately ended up picking to go play Major League Baseball and played for the Tigers, played for a bunch of teams, the Jays, the O's, and went and played Major League Baseball. I have heard people that are old enough that remember him playing basketball up at Flint, that he was an awesome basketball player too. I mean, this is a 3-sport star, could have played football, could have played baseball. I remember asking him about, choosing baseball. He said he thought he could have a longer career playing baseball. And yeah.
Remember, he was on that 84 team, the Roar of 84.
Wait, he was part of the 84 Bless You Boys?
I believe so. I believe he was part of that Tiger team. Him and Trammell and
I'm going to throw a flag. I think that he went to the Jays before. I think
I don't know.
I'd have to look, Jerry, but I don't know. I mean, you've thrown me a curveball, and I was.
Oh, geez, Denny. Now you got me thinking. I thought he was on that team.
I don't think so, but I don't know. Look, I'm just going to say I think he was with the Blue Jays that year. But nonetheless, he is one of the great players in Michigan football history. And for me, you look back and you try to remember, when is the first – we're talking about the Tigers. I remember I'll say, well, who's your first, when you're a little kid and somebody says, who's your favorite Tiger? And you just look up and you say, the Tigers. Like you don't know the players. What I remember for Michigan football is that my dad would have us in the car, and he got so excited, he would say, guys, we're going to tune in and we're going to listen to this announcer, and this guy is he's just so wild. Like you just got to be able to listen to him. He goes crazy for Michigan. And he was talking about Ufer. He would put Ufer on, and I had never heard anything like, oh, the guts and glue, the maize and blue, oh, Ricky Leach. He would be going so crazy, and he'd be honking the horn and everything. And we would drive around, and I was just like, what in the world are we listening to? This, and there hasn't been anyone even close to Bob Ufer. He's just a one of a kind. There'd never been anything more, but that's, for me, the 70s, it was Michigan, it was Bob Ufer. And then I knew the names. I knew Rick Leach because, Bob Ufer I love Ricky Lee. I mean, he would love to play. He loved the players so much. Oh, look at him. Look at him, Jerry. He's incredible. He's the guts and glue. He's an All-American in every sense of the word. Oh, my God. We could go on and on. I love it.
McCarthy's Monsters make Earl Bruce's team look like a New York chorus line. 1, 2, 3, kick. 1, 2, 3, kick. That's the one I remember, Denny.
Oh, I remember he would he hated, I don't know about hate. Old Woodies and sets. He would just go when Michigan was going to beat Ohio State. He would lay it on so thick on Woody Hayes. Woody Hayes is going out of his mind. He can't believe it down here in the snake pit. He can barely see up at the little scoreboard down there. There's he'd be going. Oh, man. All right. Let's go to another player. Favorite of the 70s. Jerry has selected Reggie McKenzie, who would go on to anchor the electric company
in Buffalo.
The electric company.
The electric company.
Yeah. There he is. His jersey untucked, but he looks pretty imposing from an early 70s photo that we have up here.
Denny, this was one of the Michigan alumni that I ran into, and I figured that this is what a Michigan football player, former and president, should look like. And he was an outstanding man. I worked this camp in Detroit, and he was always giving back to Detroit. He loved the city of Detroit. That camp was spectacular, had phenomenal names there. Many of us Wolverines, but a lot of his buddies from the pros would come there. But Reggie was just one of the great offensive linemen ever at the University of Michigan. He's one of those guys where people say Michigan is O-line U. And you looked at Reggie McKenzie right off the bat. Great puller. Like I said, he was Thunder and Lightning with the electric company in Buffalo, and helped O.J. Simpson run for 2,000 plus yards for the first time in NFL history.
Yeah, a real star on and off the field. You're right about that with Reggie. And then one of my favorite pictures all time, and this is the way they used to do it in football. They would make the players have these exaggerated looks. Dan Dierdorf on the list, and it's crazy to see Dan flying through the air there. It's also, you look at the stadium, the no walls, right down to
that little scoreboard.
Probably taken, in 69 maybe, I don't know, but yeah, little scoreboard there, like Woody Hayes would like that. But there he is, and Dierdorf takes a back seat to no one when it comes down to being a decorated offensive lineman coming out of Ann Arbor.
I remember Dan Dierdorf telling us a story about when Bo was recruiting him, and Bo was at Miami of Ohio, and Dan was like, I'm going to Michigan. I'm not going to Miami of Ohio. And then a couple years later, here comes Bo Schembechler into the room, and Dan's got to meet him, and Dan goes up to him and puts his hand out, and Bo puts his hand out, and Bo grabs Dan's belly and says, "You're too heavy."
Dan Dierdorf was a Hall of Fame.
And I don't forget. And that was the other thing he said, and I don't forget.
Hall of Fame NFL player. And then what I knew him most for was being a great announcer for NFL games. I mean, his voice for the years that he was an NFL announcer, I mean, playoff games, everything, all the way up to, and he kept doing it. When Brady was on his run, he did a lot of those games with the Patriots. And
Dan Dierdorf was with the Cardinals, Denny. You remember, and remember the Cardinals back then when he played with, him, Conrad Dobler, I believe O.J. Anderson was on that team running the ball for him. But the Cardinals, Eric Coryell, remember that was their that was a nickname that was coming out of there. And the Cardinals had one of the great offenses in the NFL back then. And so, again, here's another Michigan offensive lineman on one of the better offensive teams in the NFL.
Yeah, and I'm glad you put Dan Dierdorf on there, because you look, that's right, 1970. You had to go back to the first part of the decade. Same thing with McKenzie, Jerry, one of his 5 favorite Michigan football players. Here's another one. Everyone's an All-American in every sense of the word. And, Jerry, when I initially told you this, you went off the top of your head. I thought Lytle, being from Ohio, would have been somebody that you would have picked right out. But, you ended up texting Rob Lytle. Once you thought about it a little bit more, here he is, the great running back from Michigan.
Hard to keep him off the list, Denny. I mean, third in the Heisman voting that year in the 70s. Rob Lytle was the epitome of the Michigan running game. I mean, very unselfish guy. He played fullback, played tailback, did whatever he was asked to do, and was a great football player at the University of Michigan, and God rest his soul.
Yeah, I'm with you on Lytle. He would have been the first. I was talking earlier. He would have been the first guy, Leach being the second, that I would know as a youngster. Rob Lytle. Here's the fifth player that Jerry put. You go back again. This is towards the early 70s. Well, you make, how about some color pictures? I didn't see any colored pictures of, the black and white photos.
Never saw a colored picture of a Michigan All-American in their sweater. Never saw it.
Oh, yeah, that's the way they do it, right?
Yep.
So you got Dave Brown.
Dave Brown was everybody's All-American in 1974. He was everybody's All-American. Great football player, 15-year career, I believe it was, in the NFL. Dave was just a solid performer, dominant performer, nice size, but he was just very dominant on the field and an outstanding career at Michigan. And unfortunately, I believe he was one of those guys that never got to a bowl game.
Captain of the 74 squad, a native of Akron, Ohio, as well. Also, I don't know how that ended up playing into it, but a 2-time consensus All-American, 3-time All-Big Ten.
I was really torn between him and Donnie Dufek, and I could have gone either way. Donnie Dufek, the original Wolfman in the Michigan defense, phenomenal player, phenomenal NFL career. I could have gone either way with it. My thing was Dave had that consensus. Everybody thought Dave was the man.
Well, you know what, Jerry? I added Don Dufek anyways, and I just put him on for my favorite. And I agree with all the ones that you had there. But I ended up putting Don Dufek. He's one of my favorites. I don't remember Dufek playing, but what I do remember is that people would tell me, I started working in Ann Arbor in the 90s, and they'd say, you get the things like 2 sports stars, like Rick Leach, we talked about playing baseball and football. I had heard of that. Don Dufek, football player, hockey player, playing. I mean, how many guys do you hear, play football and play hockey? And I don't know, Jerry, you work at a golf course occasionally. There was a time that I played at the Michigan golf course. He was in my foursome, so he wasn't riding in the golf cart with him, but Don Dufek was in the foursome that I was in that we teed off. And I thought for me that was, so I always say I played golf with him, but I don't know if that's really true that I played with him. But
the original Wolfman, he was the original Wolfman, the Wolfback in the Michigan defense. And that was kind of a status symbol. I mean, if you were the Wolfman on the Michigan defense, you were known for your hitting ability and your athleticism. And Donnie Dufek was the epitome of both. I mean, he was an outstanding player.
I find that I try not to get starstruck. Jerry, when I met you, it was very nice meeting you. I didn't want to, start putting my arm around you. And, Jerry, and all this. Don Dufek is somebody with his family. I remember meeting his dad one time, and I thought, well, this is class. I mean, he was very classy. He was about as class as could be. I like Don Dufek. I like Billy Dufek. I like the entire family. So I'm a huge fan of the Dufek family, and I can't say enough about them.
Great family, great University of Michigan family, no question about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to go through, but the guys that have their dads played there, they played there. That's pretty cool, to have that kind of distinction there, and they stayed around. I still think I don't know if they're all in Ann Arbor. I think Billy still is. People would you could easily correct me on that, but that's the kind of stuff. So there it is, all the way back to the 70s. So next time you come on, Jerry, we'll go to the 80s. So you start thinking about that.
Yeah, somebody said they wanted Scar on that list. Well, Scar's not that old. I know he looks that old, but he's not that old. He's only he's 85, 86 there. So 84, 85 with me.
Ferris says Don Dufek looked like Starsky and Hunt's stunt double. It's true. Yeah, he had, but I think the thing, he kind of kept that hair for that. I haven't seen him in a long time, but I remember when he was in that golf.
Yeah.
Or some, he still had, I don't know if it was still up rolling like that. Remember hockey players, they like to have the hair flying out the back, that. A fair saying that he used to have hair like Dave Brown. 6'2" with an afro, down to 5'10" with a big bald spot now. Hat required outside.
That's a good one. I laughed at that one.
Oh, you saw that one already? Are there any other ones in here before we go, Jerry? I said I was only going to keep you for a half hour. And here we are. Rip Stars talking about Superman, Dan Dierdorf. Great job. Any final thoughts, Jerry?
No, I'm looking forward to great season this year for Michigan football, and I think we're on the right track. As far as the NCAA is concerned, big nothing burger as far as I'm concerned. What are they going to do? Start seeing who wins national championships by people in an office with a suit? I don't think so. So future's looking bright, and those 70s guys, they were some phenomenal players, laid the groundwork for a lot of us. So
it was a lot of fun going through your list there. Thanks so much, Jerry. We'll see you next time.
Hail to the victors, Denny.
There he is, Jerry Diorio.